These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. This episode of the Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Defend Security Cameras. Austin Smith Jr. I've been so excited about this. I told you this already. I've been so excited about this show. I've been thinking about it ever since we first talked. First of all, thank you for your service. What was your job in the Marine Corps?
I was 0311.
Okay.
My primary MOS.
Which is, for those who don't know?
It's a infantry rifleman.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the entire Marine Corps is built around supporting our riflemen, our infantrymen.
Yep.
Which is different from every other service branch. And as a Marine, it's kind of weird to even think about a military branch that isn't the same as us. Like, what do you mean you do stuff besides warfighting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My whole thing was I wasn't originally going to go in the infantry. I was going to pick some cool job that would have gave me a job outside of the Marine Corps. Then I realized that this is like the reason I stepped into the Marine Corps and the infantry was I was last to enlist. So all the cool jobs got taken up, right? And I was young, 17, right? Everyone else was kicking it off. So I guess I'm aging myself. I joined 2004. Mm-hmm. So I'm graduating class of 2004 from high school.
Same as me.
So I was like, well, I'm going to enlist.
So have you turned 40 yet?
Oh, that's this year.
This year?
Yeah.
I just turned 40 a couple days ago.
Happy birthday, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I graduated as a 17-year-old in 2004 as well, but I went to college for 5 years of a 4-year program, and then went in as an officer.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So you did three deployments?
Yep, 3 deployments.
Iraq, Afghanistan?
All Iraq. Yep.
Ramadi?
We were up in Haditha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Haditha Dam.
Yep. Then we're down near Karma.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, what's that called? We're just east of Karma. And then my last deployment was a MEU. So we floated over and, did the train ups and workups in Oki and
cool.
Korea and all that. So
it seems to me first of all, let me ask this question. What's a preferred language? Do you like American Indian, Native American, Native? Like what's your go-to?
I typically just say Native.
Yeah.
A lot of, some of those that are politically, they'll say Native American or Indian, like American Indian.
Yeah.
So whatever you check the box on, like your voter form or your registration and whatnot, most of them I say American Indian or Alaska Native. That's typically the box I check.
Yeah.
But for here, like when you're talking to someone, like I'm a enrolled tribal member at Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, I usually call myself Native.
Yeah. It seems like Natives tend to gravitate towards the Marine Corps over other branches. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen it. Well, Army.
Yeah.
Army, Navy, Marine Corps. But predominantly the Marine Corps is what, my relatives I have. The reason I joined the Marine Corps was my older cousin. He graduated in 2000, and then of course 2001, 9/11, and then the invasion, and then pushing into Iraq and Afghanistan, all that. So he was part of all that. Then he came home, actually around this time frame. He was home on leave, and he just something changed in him. I could tell, And it was that confidence, because before he was just kind of quiet, timid, didn't say too much, was vocal, but you could tell, man, this guy is ultimate badass. And that was my cousin. I looked up to him, and I told him I wanted to join. And I have an older brother that was in the Army, and an older sister that was in the Army. And I had other family that were in the Marine Corps and the Army, Vietnam, Korea, World War II, World War I, go back to Indian wars, like even back to the Snake Wars, the Modoc War. So I had family all the way through that served in some sort of conflict then that the U.S. was in. So I was like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps because, one, my cousin's in there, and it's just something just told me that was my calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about the warrior ethos that is part of this tribe. Mm-hmm. Does that lend itself, like that tradition, that expectation that is kind of handed down generationally, does that lend itself to combat and to the Marine Corps?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Like it's a rite of passage, and it starts at a really young age. I found it out like when I was being brought up, there was always like, the young men had a rite of passage they have to go through, and it wasn't joining the military or being a warrior. It was actually started from like catching your first salmon, catching, killing your first deer. So that was like the first steps. And there's certain ceremonies that go. I've been told there's 9 different ceremonies you have to do before you're actually a leader, a man, or considered a warrior. And some of those are just like, you see my hair is long. I rate hair now. That's one of those rite of passage in the warrior society. And the warrior's path is that, you have to give to the people. You're there as a warrior, not just for yourself and not for, showboating around. You're there for the people to protect, preserve, and ensure that they're protected. So with us, it was also the rite of passage was, as a young man, you catch that first salmon, kill that first deer, you're taking. You also have to give back. So that was something that you would do. Now you're giving your flesh back to your people. So that what you do is you join, you'd go off. And then there were ceremonies when you went off. So when you went, you had to be given a name, an Indian name, so that if you were to fall in combat and you pass on to the next world or the next place, that they know you by your name, your Indian name. So like my Indian name was given to me. It was passed down from my grandfather. And he was in his about 80s when he passed on. And, he served in World War II, right? So he enlisted. He was in the Army. He went all over the world, did some stuff that he didn't really share with us. And I'm sure I could look up where he went, what he did, and what unit he was with. But, his Indian name was given to him by his uncle, who was, he was born in the mid-1800s. So I'm like, all right, well, this is a name that's been passed down generations. So my Indian name was Kamayach. And it really doesn't mean anything, but it comes from a man who was a warrior from the river. So that was kind of the interpretation he gave me. It was like, it was a warrior, and we come from the river. We come from the Columbia River and the Columbia River Gorge. It wasn't always named Columbia, so there's a name for that. It's called Inchiwana. And the Ichishki name means this big river.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we say, we're the Inchiwana or the Wanapum, the people of the river, So that thing, all of these processes through the Warrior Society, you're given, And not everyone receive them. Some just kind of just go and do it. But that was how I was brought up and taught in our, what we considered our church is our longhouse. And the religion is very much, the stories, the origin stories, the myths and the creation stories are very similar to Christianity. I found that out really interesting. Like the Great Flood, right? That happened. We also had a great flood in our stories, and they could date it back. Eruption of volcanoes and, fireballs coming down on the earth, destroying all that is not as good, but cleaning the land. Stories like that. And now you look in the Bible, you see some of those similarities. And so growing up, I was always, very cautious of Christianity and of our Seven Feathers religion, because I was split. I was always told, you're Indian, you're Native, you're supposed to know this. And then on the other side, my dad, my grandpa, they all went to boarding schools, and they were baptized as Christians. And they read the Bible, learned the Bible, lived by it. And that's how they lived. They came home, and once they got jobs and worked and took care of their family. And so there's that type of upbringing. But at the same time, they still had preserved a lot of their cultural from the native side and just integrated them into one.
And there's room for both in your life.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the flood in the Seven Feathers origin story. Do you feel like it dates back to what we're calling like this Younger Dryas impact, this 11,000 year ago thing? And we know that the Columbia flooded multiple times. And do you think that's maybe where that is from, or is it from a different time?
I think it's a little bit of both. So there's stories of when they came to this land and how they lived off of it. So you're probably thinking like 11, 20,000 years ago when they came across, and they basically worked through the area, not in just one jaunt.
Yeah.
But when they came into this area, it was fruitful because of the amount of food available. You're probably thinking back to the last Pleistocene where everything's regressing off. And then the Missoula floods, I think that's part of some of the creation story pieces, is like these great floods came out. And if you go biblical, you're thinking like, that was thousands of years of over time flooding. But the Great Flood, that's still being told in other nations. And they're trying to put them all on top of each other, see how the similarities are. Because most of it is not written down. It's either oral history, or if it was written down, it's sitting in some museum or some church over in Europe, from the first contact here. So I've been hearing a lot of that. That's also part of my job, is the cultural resources preservation, working with museums, reparations and whatnot, just giving back to, to the natives, like there's remains that were taken from our area, or there was funerary items or whatever it may be. They're just being given back to the tribes.
That's cool. Yeah. I bet it's fun when you can find something like that and bring it back home again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's got to be a powerful feeling. On the way over today, I stopped at the museum and the John Day fossil beds. I'd never actually gone through that before. And looking at some of those old skulls and thinking about all these huge predators that used to be here, these bear dogs and tigers and the American lion and the false saber-toothed tiger that were all right here in Oregon. But what I was kind of surprised by is, and I'd known this story, like I knew that this is how this happened, but there was all these volcanic eruptions that would kill just about everything and would cover it all in ash and mud and tephra, and that's what would fossilize everything. So that's how we learn about these plants and these animals. But it happened over and over again in these different layers so that we can date it. But I was surprised by the amount of sadness that I felt thinking about all these species, all this life getting wiped out and then slowly growing back over thousands and thousands of or millions of years, and then it happening again. Just like these stacks of death that we're now digging around in to find these fossilized bones and try and piece together the history of this part of the planet. It's very interesting, but it's also a little bit sad thinking about it just getting wiped out over and over again.
Yeah. There's excavations they have where they have like schools. So it'll have like an archaeologist school and anthropologists come in and they'll do their studies. They'll bring their students there. So we have one of those schools that's going on this year in the Conley Caves. And that's a really unique place because it's showing the presence of tribes in the area.
Right.
But what did they harvest? What did they live off of? So they're finding stuff. One of the cool excavations they did was of a bison in this area. It's probably one of those, different subspecies
like
that
steppe
lived on
bison or something.
Yeah, something crazy. But they're finding yes, they utilize it. They have the bones here. And you have projectiles and showing markings within the ribs of one of them, like from a point. And I'm like, that's really cool.
So cool.
For us, it's unique because we have a connection to bison hunting, not only here, but in other areas. And it's been documented that our tribe went from this location seasonally and migrated up to go do some bison hunting, say up in in Yellowstone area, right? Yeah. And so that was pretty cool, that just learning about that piece and connecting that we have a history of it, because traditionally I've been told that all you guys ever did was fish, right?
Right.
I'm like, okay, you say that, Thanks, Professor.
I was talking to an anthropologist about this with regards to the Nez Perce tribes from the area that I'm from. And they're like, why would they go to Montana to hunt bison when there's so much game here and so much salmon? And I looked at this dude and I was like, maybe the boys just wanted to go on a hunting trip. Like, what, you think we're that much different? Like, we still do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it could potentially be as simple as that. What do you think?
I think it's a relationship thing.
Yeah.
So there's this great trade network that existed, and our tribe was from one of those. It was called Celilo Falls. Mm-hmm. It was a giant trade area where everyone came into, not only because of the fish and the trading, but also just the connection to other cultural tribes in the area, because not everyone's the same. So you have coastal tribes that would do this trek, tribes that came up from the Columbia, mounted Columbia, the Astoria area, the different Chinook bands. Then you had tribes that came off the plateau, tribes that came from the north, and they would just trade everything like a giant rendezvous, right? And at the same time, they'll tell stories and they would communicate together. And I'm guessing they'd be like, hey, dude, I shot this last year, this big old bison, and they're like, oh man, I want one of those. All right, let's plan a trip together, right?
Yeah.
We do the same thing today.
Of course.
Yeah.
You've got 20 acres, and your security camera can see about 50 feet from your Wi-Fi router. Your gate, your barn, your equipment, all the places you actually need to monitor, they're exactly where your Wi-Fi doesn't reach. That's where Defend security cameras make a lot of sense. They work on cellular, just like your phone. But here's what's clever. They've got an embedded SIM card that automatically connects to the best network in your area. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. It finds whatever's strongest. No choosing providers, no contracts, no hassle. I'm using Defend cameras at my place. You mount it, open the Defend app on your phone, and you're done. 10 minutes. Clear footage, night vision, instant alerts, and here's something you need to know. Defend doesn't sell your data. Not to China, not to tech companies, not to anyone. They work for you, period. Defend your place.
I thought it was so funny that this guy was like racking his brain to figure it out. Like, you obviously don't hunt. Like,
Yeah. I have a really hard time with some anthropologists where they're like, this is probably what happened. I'm like, oh no, it's probably not true, because it takes a hunter, fisherman, gatherer, or whatever you may be, could be a rancher or whatever, right, to actually live in those shoes or those moccasins, say, of someone that was in the area, and then they'd understand. Mm-hmm. So we're connecting that. We actually have a environmental company that does like compliance review and surveys, and majority of them are, they're probably sitting around like 30% tribal members, but we own it and run it, and I sit on one of their boards, so I kind of help out and kind of push them towards that direction of understanding the tribes, just not our tribe, all the other tribes in the area. And then also, those that came in and settled early on, understanding their livelihood, how they settled the area and worked, and resources they utilize, and why to protect them, and why to say, you're building this road, but at the same time, you're destroying something that was there and utilized for X amount of years. Let's protect it a little bit, because it may be useful little ways down the road.
Yeah. There's important knowledge there.
Yep.
Yeah. So interesting. What's your job here in this office?
Okay, so we're sitting in at the Natural Resources branch. This is our headquarters. My job title is I'm the general manager or director of natural resources. So I'm the head boss for natural resources under the tribe. So it's made up of multiple branches of like health and human services, public safety, which includes like your fire and safety, your police. There's our utilities. There's your education, and then there's natural resources. So I'm one of those that I oversee this. And full-time staff, we're probably sitting around 320 full-time staff with seasonals that come on. And so I oversee like a lot of our hot shot firefighting crews, our fuels, our engines, our forestry development, harvest, management, planting, development. Our water and soils department, so looking at watersheds, coordinating on management of watersheds on our reservation and off, as well as our cultural resources department, overseeing like reviewing any type of process developments like 106 for cultural resources protection and review. And then we have our fisheries department, which is probably one of our largest departments, and that oversees like all of our fish management, everything from restoration type of work to management, distribution, harvest. So those one of those big ones for our tribe, and that stretched out not only our reservation, which is located in Central Oregon, south of Portland, about 2 hours, north of Bend, about an hour. And we're sit right on the edge of the Cascade Mountains, so the eastern boundary. It's about 640,000 acres proper. So, and really half of Mount Jefferson sits on us, as well as Olalla Butte. So those that know where those locations are.
Wow.
And so you think about the water and watershed, and what a lot of our streams, creeks, and reservoirs has anadromous fish in there. So they return from the oceans every year. And so we manage them that way. And we have one national fish hatchery on our reservation, Warm Springs National, and that produces about 750,000 salmon.
Chinook salmon?
Yeah, spring Chinook salmon.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other species?
Yeah, they used to produce steelhead and trout at one point, but the water, that's really tough cold water species, and I'll get to like issues we're having in the watershed is we have a lot of major wildfires given that we're in a storm shadow. Mm-hmm. So then you have a dry forest. Well, we get a lot of lightning strikes as well as a lot of human caused fires on the range. And of our range, we have about 440,000 acres, probably roughly, of range to transition into pine forest, where you get a lot of wildfires. Now, the upper part of it's really impacted our watersheds, and so then you have stressed out watersheds where they're getting heated up pretty quick.
More sediment, less shade.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, all that. Then, on top of that, we sit on a geothermal area where you have a lot of basalt and you have a lot of hot springs. Hence the name Warm Springs.
Oh, wow. It's coming together. Yeah.
So then you want to raise spring Chinook in this canyon where it gets freaking hot.
Yeah.
And so it's the feds that put there in, that was put in place after all the dams were going in on the Columbia River. Mm-hmm. And so it was to help us out with supplemental for spring Chinook the runs that we had lost. All those stocks were starting to disappear. And it wasn't just the dams. It was, there's canneries, there's fish wheels, there were weirs up. Everyone was just loving salmon and all the other species, right? And all of those were being exported, imported, everything like that. So the hatcheries were put in place. So that's one hatchery we have on the reservation. Then you go up to the re-regulating dam. We have a fish trap there that actually collects salmon, steelhead, and it transports them up. There's a fish ladder there. It doesn't work as great. A lot of fish will get into it. And, of course, another issue, warm water,
right,
being a reservoir. And they go up to the other dams. You got the Pelton Dam and the Round Butte Dam on the Deschutes River. And up there, that's where they get put back into, these watersheds where they can go up into the Deschutes, up into the White Shoes, the Metolius. So you got spring Chinook, you got steelhead, you got lamprey, you got bull trout. Those are the main species that we really rely on. But then, of course, the native species that are here residential, the red band trout. And then we have high lakes as well on our reservation that hold brook trout, dolly varden, pretty much the known Cascade lake trouts.
Do you have some invasives or non-natives that you have to deal with, like carp and bass?
Not too much. I think we're getting more of those in like different watersheds. We don't have too many of those issues on our lakes anyhow.
That's good.
On the reservoirs itself, there's, I think some of the more invasives are like when boats and everything come in.
Right.
Then you're getting probably mussels and clams that, are transported in from other reservoirs that's something of caution that we do have.
Yeah, I saw they just found a quagga mussel in
Yep.
Prineville Reservoir.
Yep.
That's scary. There's not just one.
No. Yeah. That's something you gotta be thinking. What's the course to that? What do you have to do? You have to get really strict, because if that takes over the whole area,
Yeah.
And we have initiative to get more from our fish, steelhead and spring snook into these areas like the Crooked River. And I mean, that's something that's been one of our objectives for a long time.
We're doing a lot of similar work on the Six Ranch on a much smaller scale, but I think we ended up putting in like 750,000 coho this year.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be the first year that the coho were released high enough up in that system that they can utilize the river that we've done our river restoration projects on. And then, we've been fairly successful at our scale with Chinook salmon coming back and utilizing those restored sections. And if that dam does get rebuilt, then we'll at least have fish passage for sockeye. But man, it's 600 miles from the ocean, and tough. It's a really warm time of year for them to make it up the Columbian snake.
They're very sensitive too. Like as soon as you hit 70, like they start going crazy. I was just down at Bonneville Dam. Was that Tuesday? We did a tour of their adult facility where they actually do all the genetics to, all the science aspects of understanding the rate of return. And yeah, that's, they're already getting sockeye coming in. And I just seen that the state, they delayed the opening of the sockeye season because of the low return. I mean, there's an enormous amount of shad coming up, right?
Yeah.
But the sockeye are barely making it through. But the ones they did come through, man, they were pretty healthy.
They're bright fish.
Oh yeah, very much. And for the tribes, we've also done like the coho projects here on our watershed. So we do have a big surplus of coho that come into the Warm Springs River. So that was a reintroduction project that we did. And they're doing really successful to the point where we're actually opening up more fisheries for them. It's probably going to be a big fishery on the Deschutes River for them this year. We opened a fishery on the Warm Springs River for our tribal members, which historically it's been closed for the past 18 years.
Awesome.
So now it's being productive. They did do an opener for the spring chinook on the Deschutes River this year. It's like a 2-3 week opener.
And just it's easy to think about this from like a food or recreational standpoint, but if you dial it back to what you're talking about, where this first rite of passage of becoming a man and a warrior is to catch a salmon, you've got to have a salmon to catch to do it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So being able to have that opportunity, like culturally, that's got to be really important.
Very much. Yeah. In fact, we have litigated because the impact of not just our fishing or having fish, is having the fresh water, the quality and quantity of water to have salmon.
Yeah.
Because that's a treaty, right? You understand like where does our...
Which treaty is it?
So our treaty is a treaty of 1855.
Okay.
It was signed by the tribes of Middle Oregon.
Yep.
And actually today, June 25th.
Really?
1855. Today is Treaty Day.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we're doing a celebration here. So we'll have like a big powwow, rodeo, endurance race, celebration, parades, all of that. So that's kicking off tomorrow.
Okay.
So it usually lasts 3 days, right? But the treaty itself, when it was signed, it was like signed after all the other tribes in the area. And I say other tribes, I mean the Nez Perce, the Umatilla, Cayuse, Walla Walla, and the Yakima, and the multiple bands of Yakima. They had already signed their treaty with Stevenson and Joel Palmer. So we're a Joel Palmer treaty signer. So that agent came down. But at the same time, we had individuals that could read and write. So they traveled. One of those individuals was Billy Chinook.
Okay.
So if you know the history of him, he actually traveled with the Army on expeditions down into what at the time would have been considered Mexico, right? Into these areas, and mapped, interpreted, and he knew the language and he knew the laws. And then when he came home, probably after his military service and then coming home, then he realized that all these areas were having issues. When I say issues, there was a lot of these traditional gathering village sites, whatnot, were having conflicts with settlers coming in. And so he wrote Joel Palmer because he was a friend, right? And said, hey, we're having these issues. And he started writing all these different individuals that worked for the government. And so they started going around and said, all right, well, we need to make treaties. We need to look at how we can negotiate because we have people coming on the Oregon Trail, right? And we have people settling in the Willamette Valley. Well, we had a lot of villages and sites that were in the Willamette Valley for some of our bands, our Wasco and Warm Springs bands. And so leading up to the Treaty of 1855, they just met, worked on it. They traveled over, listened to what the treaties were being signed, what was being included in there, how it's being interpreted. And so you look at our treaty today, it's built a little bit different than theirs. And part of the pieces in there that we really understand was really pivotal for us today was not only that we secured and reserved, we were never given anything, we were reserved the right to hunt, fish, and gather and pasture livestock in their Aboriginal lands. At the time, it was the Oregon Territory. And so that was a pretty huge area. It's multiple states.
That went all the way to the Dakotas, didn't it?
Yes, most definitely. And also part of that was it described our ceded lands, which are ceded to us to do all of that area, our exclusive right for this area. Our eastern border was not drafted up by us. It was drafted up by the Umatilla tribes. They knew that this area was our tribal area. So that would be the crest of the Blue Mountains. So they knew like if they went in there, they came into the Warm Springs tribal territory. So they drew that line. That's the western boundary of their ceded lands. Now, as the government wrote it out, it's basically that's the eastern boundary. Then you go down to, I guess it would be an arbitrary line called a 44th parallel. And that shot straight to the crest of the Cascades Mountains going west. Then you follow the crest of the Cascades all the way up till you hit the Columbia River kind of area called the Cascade Locks. There near Bonneville Dam. So that area, and then you follow the middle channel of the Columbia River, following it all the way up to Willow Creek, which then flows into the Blue Mountains. So that would be considered about 10 million acres of our ceded lands that we utilize today. And of course, there's also some areas that we also utilize outside of that boundary, that area. And so this is where I was given the information by my tribal elders, like that was really key when our tribal leaders, our clan leaders, or chiefs were signing this treaty. They didn't want to forget about those that were not there to sign treaty. So those that were clans that were out. So we talk about, all the boys going up for a hunting trip up into Montana, up into Wyoming. Maybe they're up in a Gifford Pinchot in Washington with their families, berry picking. So you're thinking June. They're also down in Willamette Falls getting lamprey or eels. Yeah. Maybe they're down on the ocean making their way back from halibut or clam, getting clams and shells and trading. Or they're down in Lakeview area hunting deer and antelope. So so that was kind of the idea. They wanted to include them in the treaty, and so they put the usual and custom use stations as key language in there, and so that's how it was interpreted, that you have bands that are outside of this area, and so you have the right to go still utilize those areas.
How much conflict does that cause today?
Being that it's stations, we have to consult with multiple agencies today. With the federal government, it was like, okay, you have a right to go here. So they would just say, all right, you're going to go there to this area at this time. Okay, you have safe passage. But fast forward into today, we have to sit down with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, with Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Nevada, and let them know, like, hey, we're going to be going to these areas, and we have to draft up some sort of regulation, some sort of memorandum of understanding that we'll be going in. They have to respect that we have a treaty right. Remember, it's a federal treaty right. It's recognized by the United States government and where the treaties are found, right? So it's supreme law of the land, and therefore it has to be followed by the feds and the states and those. So it does create conflict. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does, because now you have other tribes that overlap each other. So for us, we have an understanding with Umatilla, Yakima, Nez Perce, where we do have overlap in areas because at one time we were one people. We
Right.
utilized the same place. We spoke some of the same language. Our dialects are very much the same. In fact, we had such a connection that we traded and bartered with each other all the time. Now, other tribes like the Upper Columbia tribes, the Lower Columbia, the Willamette tribes, the Western tribes, Washington, we have some conflicts there. And that's been in place forever.
Well, I mean, that conflict is generally founded over contest for resources,
Yes.
right? That's what our wars are fought over today, is contest over resources. So there's nothing new about that.
Not at all. Like even before, the area was colonized and taken over, there was always already conflict. Don't get me wrong. There was, like, for our tribe, after I talked about the treaty, it was the treaty between the tribes of Middle Oregon. That included the Wasco bands and the Warm Springs bands. There's another band that's now currently it's the Paiute bands. Mm-hmm. They were not treaty signers. They came in later on as actually prisoners of war. And so the cavalry was marching them out of these areas in southern Oregon and eastern Oregon. And they were actually left here on a reservation because they needed the provisions. And the cavalry said, all right, we're going to leave you here. You're going to live here in this prison camp, basically. And this is like post-1855. And then we're going to come back for you and round rest of you guys up and bring you to your homelands. Well, then they forgot about them. And of course, over time, we eventually adopted them into our tribe. Then we have our own constitution, bylaws. We own our own sovereignty. We have our own police station. We have our own laws. We own all of that. So they are adopted into that. And so we accept them now today. So if you see some of our logos, we have 3 teepees on it. So that represents the Wasco, Warm Springs, and Paiute bands. So with that being said, now our interest is even stretched further with the Wasco, the northern Paiute bands. And so the Wascos and the Warm Springs will look at it as like, all right, well, at one point in time, you were our enemy, but now you're our family. And so that's just that whole bringing them in. And it does create conflict. There's bands that don't like the fact that now they are a fairly recognized tribe. They have the rights to do everything that we signed for.
Well, that's not that much different, from my perspective, and correct me, Austin, if I'm wrong, but I don't see that as too much different as you serving in the United States Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. Like once enemy, but you're also an American.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty cool. Yeah. That's amazing. And I think that if you get into the history of warfighting, you're going to find a million examples of this where people who were once adversaries now face a common enemy together. And then through that, find new ways to integrate and appreciate each other and become brothers at the end of it.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah. And there's no brotherhood in the world like the one that gets forged in combat.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, it's pretty special. You have a lot going on. You're a busy guy.
I am. Yeah. I mean, every resource. I cut my teeth into natural resources as a wildlife biologist.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I rewind back. I was a technician. I was a youth intern.
Right.
In 2002. I watched our first bighorn sheep reintroduction project happen here on the reservation.
Where did they come from?
They came from the John Day.
Okay, so not from too far away.
No. I mean, they wanted to keep very much the same genetics that were introduced, right? So like, and most of those came from BC, as what I understand. Yep. So they were reintroduced back in the area.
I did a podcast with Vic Coggins about that reintroduction, and it was a really funny episode. And for people who are interested in sheep, they should go back and listen to that. But he basically traded the Canadian biologist beer for bighorn sheep. Like it was the Wild West of wildlife biology.
Lo and behold, today, so we're an affiliate of the Wild Sheep Foundation, and then we work pretty closely with ODFW on sheep management and augmenting herds. So now We actually are part of this initiative called the Coming Home Project, where we're actually working with multi-state, multi-jurisdiction now on helping the BC herds because they're not doing so great.
Right.
So now we're actually taking the sheep that were grown down here in Oregon and sending them back up. So that's something that's going to be happening here soon. And for our tribe, our population of bighorn has went from 20-ish sheep to a 300 plus. And now to the point where we have so many, we're actually auctioning tags off at Wild Sheep Foundation sheep show and auction every year, one hunt. And also we give out, lottery tags for our tribal members to hunt that population as well. But we also have a surplus where they're starting to leave the area. They're like starting to mingle with domestics, which isn't good. So,
right.
So we, of course, our SOP for that is really, we can't have that. We can't have disease transmission. You see what happened to all those herds in Eastern Oregon. So we're wanting to potentially at some point relocate or translocate a bunch of these guys and augment the herds up north in Canada.
Are you dealing with aoudad also?
Oh yeah. Some of the lands that the tribes own and manage off the reservation. So we have a couple of properties over on the John Day that have aoudad issues. Mind you, we have bighorn sheep to the north and bighorn sheep to the south, but on our property we have nothing but aoudad and a lot of elk and a lot of deer. But the aoudad have moved in there and kind of set up shop, and we know there's resource issues and competition going on there, and they're great to hunt and shoot and whatnot, but it's just we want to see more native bighorns in there versus the aoudad issue. I know it's really bad in some areas in different states like Texas, and
yeah, and they can really get going too.
Oh yeah,
I'm surprised that they haven't taken off as well in this country because they've had plenty of time. Mm-hmm. And they are spreading way out. There was one way up in the North Fork of the John Day here a couple of years ago. Personally, I kind of want to see them in Hell's Canyon because the bighorns there they're struggling so hard. It feels like they're just constantly on life support. Every single one of them seems like it's got a collar and 2 ear tags, and it just doesn't look like a wild animal.
No.
And I would love to see that ground get utilized and have a huntable species, which brings up this theory that I have that I want to ask you about. Do you think there were ever ibex in the Columbia River Basin?
I don't know. I mean,
because some of those glyphs look way more like ibex than they look like bighorns.
Yeah, and the thin-horned sheep. I know we're in the basin, right? But there's a lot of things that during the multiple floods that happened in Columbia could have washed a lot of them away. But a lot of the the rock art and the drawings that date back thousands of years, they're still there.
Right.
Like even when the dams were put in, they documented a bunch of them, and they definitely could have been. I'm not ruling them out because there was a lot of stuff that was washed away. Everything from village sites to animals as well.
One of the things that I find really compelling about some of those drawings is their tails are up.
Yeah.
Bighorns can't do that.
Yep.
Their tail doesn't work like that, but goats do.
Yeah.
And you've got these long sweeping horns. I just have a feeling they're in Mongolia. All these other animals were crossing. I just have a feeling that we had ibex, and the Columbia Gorge would have been wonderful habitat for them. Mm-hmm. And it looks like they're there. I want them back.
Yeah.
I want to bring back ibex.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of things that were...
You could do it, Austin. Nobody's going to tell you no.
Right. I want all these, all sorts of megafauna. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about the horse situation.
Yeah. So, I guess dating back to when the tribes... were relocated to this area in Central Oregon. The whole role was to integrate the tribes into society. Part of that was ranching and farming. So of course, came with it was livestock and horses, and in order to run livestock, you needed horses. So that's what the tribes did.
So were you not a big horse culture?
Not predominantly. We did have horses, and it was primarily for trade and travel to our winter and summer camps. You know, a lot of the tribes further east, like the Umatillas, Walwas, Cayuse, and the Nez Perce, they utilize horses pretty heavily. You know, they dominated the plateau on horses. You know, they won a lot of battles, a lot of wars. And for us, though, we really controlled the water and the fishing resource and the trade routes. And you could probably go back and look at a couple of different books about the Wasco bands and the Warm Springs bands that utilized, you know, they did utilize horses. But as they were relocated post-treaty, you know, they utilized horses quite a bit on here. And, you know, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they're all cowboys. They all utilize horses. They did rodeo, they did roping, they did all of that. My brothers still do that today. They're ranchers. And the horse population was booming, right? Because when we needed them, they also, at one point, were utilized for food. So during the harsh times, you know, I'm thinking like the Depression times when...
Well, it's great meat.
Yeah. I've eaten it before. I have friends in Kazakhstan that eat it. And
almost all of Europe eats horse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's terrific meat. And even like the cowboys from... you know, Wallowa County that were raising cattle, they were eating horse because it was easy for them to sell the beef.
Yep.
But anyways, keep going.
So, you know, once they had enough horses here, they utilized them. And then, of course, the timber boom happened. You know, we had our own mill here, and they started kicking out a lot of board feet. There's a lot of funding that came through when the BIA started mismanaging the resources. Then there was settlements that happened, which allowed the tribe to invest into like a resort. So we had a Canida. Canida is our resort. It's a big lodge full of pools and hot spring water. And so they start making money off of that. They started making money off the timber resources, and they just started getting into all these different. And that meant the ranching and the livestock use was starting to go down. So then now they're starting to support a lot of that industry. And so therefore the horses start getting neglected and they're just left on the range. And it was an open range. There's our grazing groups under our ordinance and policies and codes. They have to manage their rangeland. You know, our reservations broke up into about 5 to 6 different grazing groups, and they have to manage the population of their beef. You know, they have rules. They have to say X amount of bulls per herd, and have to rotate them through. You have certain pastures. You have to rotate them through the summer, the fall, and the winter ranges. So all of that was already set in play, but people started getting out of ranching, started getting into more administrative work, more into people were starting to leave the reservation. They're going off to school. They're in the military, and the horses got neglected, left out on the range. Then there was a big boom that happened in the 60s and 70s where, you know, there was a surplus of horses. There's probably on this landscape like 11,000 horses. That was a significant amount, especially for the rangeland that just can't take that. And then, of course, there was a disease came out with a big population disease. So Coggins came out. So that started hitting them hard. Well, the BIA came in like, you know, we can't have this spreading because, one, there were still ranchers here. There were still families that had ranch and used horses. And they tried to their vaccines and whatnot. So they said, no, we just need to start getting rid of them. So they started actually going out there and removing horses, shooting them, rounding them up, sending them off to feedlots. So this is like the 80s, 70s, 80s that happened. So all the way down to where they had 0 horses on the landscape. And those that had horses, they were on their own ranch and their own range and their own pastures.
And did the rangeland recover?
The wildlife population got hit hard, and the land was not. It didn't recover great. Your shrub steppe habitat, your bunch grasses, your native vegetation was hammered by the horses.
Yeah.
They also had sheep here too at one point.
And something that's different about the way horses graze that I want people to understand is most of these grazing animals only have front teeth on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And horses have teeth on the top and bottom. And because of that, they can like dig into the ground with those teeth. Like they can get deeper than anything else can. Mm-hmm. And when horses overpopulate in an area that this dry country, it's tough to bring it back.
It is. Yeah, very much. I've seen that like even now, I guess I'm getting to where, we removed horses 80s, 70s and 80s. And we fast forward to about 2000, around the time we started introducing bighorn sheep. Our mule deer population started getting impacted by horses as well. Competition, the habitat was getting degraded. Our watersheds were getting a lot of sediment, a lot of riparian issues, open range. So you had to start fencing off areas and removing horses. And then at the same time, U.S. versus Oregon, the fish accords was happening. So I'm thinking like 2008 through 2012. They started getting funds in the settlement to put money into fish management, which also meant settlements for managing reservation lands and areas and watersheds where salmon, steelhead, and returning fish needed help. That helped us out because now we're like, all right, we have a fund to remove horses, and because nobody was doing anything with them. In fact, people were starting to let them go on the reservation, thinking, "Oh, it's a wild herd, that's natural." So we had a surplus of people in Willamette and Portland area just letting horses go on the reservation.
And that was not long after it became illegal to slaughter horses in the U.S.
Yep.
So as soon as we created this law that says you can no longer slaughter horses for food in the U.S., people had nowhere to go with these horses. So all over the West, folks were just turning horses loose.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's common everywhere on BLM lands,
yeah,
public lands. So we were feeling it.
Yeah.
But through 2011, 2016, we started removing large-scale horses again. And so we removed a couple thousand horses a year, and that resulted in us getting the population down that was manageable. And immediately our wildlife population kicked back because at the same time we're doing all of these fish watershed projects. So you're fencing areas off, you're getting the riparian vegetation back in, you're seeding the uplands, and you're doing more harvest in the areas where fuels was a concern for wildfire. So all that together, actually our production of fish went up, our from wild and even hatchery returns was looking great. Then your wildlife population was doing great to the point where they're rebounding. The horse population was going down. Then we're actually we knew that, well, if we remove horses, we know that the predators are going to start targeting the deer more and more, because before they were targeting the wild horses and supplementing their population to maintain a certain amount. Well, once we start removing horses, now your lions, your bears, and everything else is going to start targeting deer. So at the same time, we started targeting lions and bears. So my cousin and two of my cousins would actively hound in Oregon, but on the reservation themselves, they would just routinely remove cats as we started doing this. So all of that going on in 2011, 2016. And I was wildlife biologist at the time. I finished Oregon State in 2015. And I started working on a mule deer project between that time. And we collared a bunch of deer, just like ODFW is doing their self-central study and their mule deer study. I was doing the same thing on the reservation. So we collared about 10% of our population of muleys and started watching them go, where they go and how they're reacting to the removals, as well as the, looking at what the percentage of were dying from lion, roadkill, disease, etc. And come to find out that they were actually starting to move into these areas where it was predominantly horses there, they utilize year round. So, and then we're doing all these developments of springs, of watershed protection. They're starting to utilize that stuff. And so the population started going up. Our elk population started going up. Our sheep population started going up, and started less competition. So the horses were being knocked down. 2016 hit.
Let me ask a question real quick.
Yeah.
So you were removing mountain lions and bears using dogs,
mm-hmm.
and your elk and deer populations went up.
Mm-hmm.
Weird.
Yeah, right?
That's so crazy.
Yep.
Gosh, I wish ODFW would acknowledge that success.
Yeah, well, at the same time, 2013, 2014 was a time when we actually started exercising our treaty hunting off the reservation a little bit more. I guess backing up. So there was a falsified treaty signed in 1865, post 1855 treaty. They offered money to about 20 different families if they signed this treaty, saying they would sign away our rights to go off the reservation to hunt and fish. That was considered the 1865 treaty, or the falsified treaty. Well, the state recognized that. The tribes didn't recognize that. The feds didn't recognize that. Yet it was still in the books. And so we had a hard time with ODFW between 1865 to, I guess ultimately it would have been 2018, when, we were being told, you don't have off-reservation rights. Yet we'd still do it. And so then they would cite us, would go to court, would win, and then it would just go in circles, right? So we'd adjudicate our rights off the reservation. But at the same time, the 65 treaty was still there. And so they had this agreement called the Donaldson Agreement. He's one of the former directors of ODFW, that yes, you have rights, but we are going to distribute those rights. So here's 10% of every tag in your ceded lands. You could utilize those to give out to your tribal members. So we still had rights off, but we had to carry a ODFW tag, just like every citizen or resident of Oregon. It was okay for us because, we had our traditional gathering, hunting, and fishing areas. So I would go out with a tag, shoot. I could get an antelope every year. I could get a deer, an elk every year, all of that, free of charge. But I was always regulated by the state's areas. I'm like, well, it worked. Then we got up to about 2013, 2014, and our new leadership came in, and our population was growing. For us, you get X amount of deer. We have to put enough away into our tribal freezer, which distributes to the public, our tribal public, for funerals, for memorials, for weddings, for gatherings, for our own use. We usually put about 100 deer in that freezer, full deer, bagged up. Well, it got very competitive around that time frame. And so we start saying, like, well, this 10% isn't enough. And also, we're competing with the rest of the state when we go out and we're doing ceremonial harvest. I know I'm going to go out there with 5 tags that were issued from ODFW to hunt for our freezer. And then my brother, my cousin, my uncle, my buddy, they're all going to do the same thing until we get that 100 deer put in that freezer for the year. And we're getting very competitive with it. We were going out and it was being really hard because now we couldn't actually go into areas because more and more people were hunting those areas. It's really hard for the tribe. But the tribe at the same time was really pushing for getting that 1865 treaty nullified. So they were pushing, and part of that was exercising treaty rights off the reservation more and more, which then helped the reservation populations out too. So we had less stress on them. We didn't hunt them as much. So our seasons went from 2 to 3 month seasons and almost year round sometimes on the reservation to only a couple months. The horse removal, the predator removal, that augmenting the herds, with reintroductions in some places. We introduced mountain goats, more bighorn sheep, supplemental populations came in. And then all of that, and the horse really was the driver for that because we knew the habitat was degrading. And then the off-reservation, more tribal members were now traveling off. The state recognized that we do have rights. And then in 2018, President Trump signed the nullification of the 1865 treaty. So it rescinded all of those 65. The state recognized that, signed it went all the way up through every sector of the law, and the president signed it saying this is no longer recognized, it's nullified. He signed it away, and therefore you cannot hold this over the tribes. And then immediately after that, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they recognized that. It's like, oh, well, you have rights, and we just have to coordinate and manage resources for conservation. And so I was like, wow, that was really unique for us. And at the same time, we got the job done with removing horses.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, as more and more hunters go from the reservation out into, federal public lands around the state in these ceded areas and hunt, are they hunting year round? Do they have seasons or limits? How does that work?
Yes. So part of our memorandum of an understanding with the ODFW is that we're to coordinate, we're to have seasons, which I'm okay with because a lot of tribal members are so used to it under Donaldson Agreement. But, at this point, it's just us issuing the permits instead of the state.
Okay.
And the seasons are a lot longer, yes, but at the same time, they're regulated to the point that we know, like, we're going to shut down rifle hunting into November, especially when the deer go into rut, to, one, protect the species, so two, give an opportunity for those with traditional use. So, like, those that want to bow hunt for muleys in November, they can. Not a lot do because of the condition of the deer. A lot of people don't like big rut bucks,
Yeah, they don't taste good.
No, not at all. And then at the same time, we regulate we're not a harvest birding. That was also part of the MOU with the state. So we look at the population trends, the harvest statistics overall, and we report on those every year. So we're a mandatory report. Sometimes we don't get all reporting, but we're pretty good about knowing that of the, say, 1,200 hunters from the reservation that go out into the Oregon areas, into our ceded lands, they harvest up to what they need. And they also harvest for other families. So, like, example, someone could be in mourning. They lost their husband. In our traditional way is they are not allowed to hunt or fish for themselves. So a relative will step up and hunt and fish for them and ensure that they have their food for the winter or for the season. So we do a lot of that. And it is regulated. So we put our regulations. We adopt it under a resolution under our tribal council and our Fish and Wildlife Committee. And then that is then shared with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it's also shared with Oregon State Police and their surrounding counties within Oregon.
And is that harvest mostly targeted towards meat, or is there a big trophy aspect of it as well?
Most of it is meat. So the ceremonial hunting is all meat. So we open it up to does and to bucks. And so a lot of it is, we don't go for trophies for those. We just want, meat for our freezer. Mm-hmm. As far as like deer and elk hunts, most of those are predominantly, there's a small percentage that like the trophy hunt. So they'll utilize that and go out and trophy hunt. I know our specialty tags, it is predominantly trophy hunting.
Yeah.
Like our sheep, goats, antelope.
Did the Warm Springs tribe historically use bighorn sheep horns for bows?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they boil them down. And
have you ever shot one?
I have not. I've held a couple before, but never have shot one.
Yeah. It's that's such old technology. Like the Persians did that too.
Yeah.
And they'd laminate them and use horn on one side and wood as a core and then sinew on the other side, because a bow is stretching on the outside and compressing on the inside.
Yeah.
It's so genius. It's really old technology, and it's fascinating to me that it would get used in such different parts of the world with different species, but still essentially the same materials. Yeah. And probably salmon skin for glue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Salmon skin. I mean, even for wrapping and, quivers and all that stuff. I mean, not just for game. I mean, small game, fish as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And there's a fair bit of obsidian in this area. So that was probably a pretty serious trade good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you go down to like Mount Vernon area, there's an enormous amount of obsidian. But that's actually one of the, when I was out in the field with some of our archaeologists and our cultural resources, they could tell by village sites, like, oh, they found some flint flakes in these areas and these high points, and thinking like, what the heck? How did these end up here?
Yeah.
Like the geology isn't right. And you're like, oh no, these guys are out here flint napping around, getting ready for their hunt.
Yep.
Or probably sitting on post, right? As a young Marine.
Right.
What do? You make some arrows.
Sharpen your knife.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I think a lot of people find some of those like places that have lots of, broken points or lots of little flakes, and they think, oh, this must have been like a village or a camp area. Mm-hmm. I don't think you would want to have a bunch of sharp obsidian flakes where you're cruising around barefoot.
Yeah.
Like those are going to be different spots.
No.
Mama's going to yell at you if you're leaving sharp stuff on the ground.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I get in trouble for leaving my tools, my bullets, and everything laying around. My kids are running around. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely see like a lot of those sites I've seen in Columbia River and these areas here in Central Oregon, Washington.
Yeah. I find black obsidian up in my country, and like we're hundreds of miles away from the closest source of that. And I think about like the trading that would have gone on. In the archaeological digs that I've looked at in the Frank Church, there's very few elk bones in them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of deer and sheep. And, I think that the bow has always been a difficult tool to use for elk. What have you found or heard in the oral histories here? Was there a lot of elk hunting going on?
Actually, no. Yeah, they were really introduced into the area. The elk that they did get into were found primarily in the flats and to, the prairie areas. There wasn't a lot of elk. Not to say they weren't here, but most of them were not heavily utilized. It was primarily deer, sheep, and, like goats and everything.
Did they hunt with dogs?
Yes. Yep.
How would they use them?
I mean, they would flush out small game, obviously, because you're not going to kill a deer every day or every other week. But they would use them to flush out game, even like protecting use. There was grizzly bears here. Right. There was a lot of wolves here, lions.
Blood trailing?
Blood trailing and just protecting. And I know the res dogs were heavily traded as well. It's kind of crazy. It's like you keep a bunch of dogs on you. When Lewis and Clark came through to Columbia Gorge, you read what they ate.
Yeah.
They weren't eating fish. They're eating dogs and horses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They really liked young dogs to eat. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you think that they ever use dogs to like gather sheep, like send them around like we do with sheepdogs and cow dogs today to bring animals back towards them?
I think early on they did. I know there was a lot of Baskin families that were in the area, and they had a lot of tribal members that worked with them or lived in the area. And what I understand is they did utilize a lot of dogs for that, for pushing animals around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Using dogs for hunting big game is such a taboo idea for a lot of people today.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated to know how dogs were historically used, by tribes and by different cultures around the world.
Oh, yeah.
And it's man's best friend, but it's also a tremendous hunting asset.
Yeah,
like the dog is the hunting dog foremost.
Oh yeah, the tool. I mean, I have 2 hunting dogs that are aging out, but I utilize them and everything. One could run around and find sheds. The other one just loves birds. I mean, there's Chucker on this ridge right up here. She'll know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another introduced species, the national bird of Iraq. Did you know that?
I did. Man, it was crazy. So we were outside of Haditha Dam, and I had gotten attached as a security element to our scout sniper platoon. Mm-hmm. And so I was thrown on a team. This is my first deployment. And
so you're pumped.
Oh yeah, I was just like, heck yeah. I'm like, I'm 11, right? So I'm just like looking around, like, dude, what am I doing hanging out with these guys?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I was like, we're out at this range, and they're like, oh, we're just confirming our 0 before we go out on these missions. And like, all right. And so they wanted me to become a pig at some point, right? So they're like indoctrinating me into the process. It's like, well, 1, you have to do the indoctrination. Then 2, you go through selection indoctrination, and then go off to school and actually become a hog. So like, all right. So I was out there, and then when they were shooting, I seen these, like, I heard the recognize, like, oh crap, what was that? And I look, and there's a freaking chucker sitting there right in the middle of the road, like staring at me. I'm like, there's chucker here.
Yeah.
So I called home to my, at the time was one of my predecessors, and I was just like, hey, I seen a chucker here. It's crazy. It's like, yeah, I was in there from there. And like, I don't know. I was,
yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's crazy.
It is crazy. And they've done so well in Oregon.
Oh man, cheatgrass, they love it here. Yeah. That's probably one of the reasons why some of our areas here where we have our sheep and a lot of elk and deer, there's the cheatgrass everywhere, there's chucker everywhere. And not many people hunt them at all.
Yeah.
Probably myself and maybe a handful. Like I like chucker hunting here, the Alvord, Jordan Valley, some of those areas. So just beautiful countries, isolated. Just get out and take your gun for a walk.
You almost couldn't pay me to hunt chucker in Hell's Canyon.
No.
It's so brutal.
No, I would not.
I grew up doing it, but man, you've got to be mad at yourself.
Yeah.
If you're not already, you're going to be by the end of the day.
It's a lot of hiking just to get off maybe 1 or 2 shots at a jet flying down.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Austin, if people are interested in this history, what are some books that you recommend people read that that aren't like completely full of shit?
A Shattered Civilization is one of them by George Aguilar. That's a good one. You could only find it a few places. There's a lot. Our museum Warm Springs Museum carries a lot of books about the Columbia River tribes. Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission has a pretty good library as well. You could go to CritFic, their website, and look up their books in there. You go on Amazon. Some that I really like are like the Forgotten Nations or the Forgotten Tribes. That's a really good book that I've read in college, and it talks about our tribe. Talks about like the Umatilla tribes. It's not like the Nez Perce are pretty big because of the conflict they had with the government. And when Chief Joseph Bands took off and tried to get into Canada. So they're really known, but we're also known as well because we utilize the same areas as the Nez Perce bands. And then, of course, anything on the Inchiwana, that's a really good book as well. It's the Big River or the tribes. That one's predominantly from Yakima, but it does involve a lot of Warm Springs names and bands and just different dialects. I probably have some on my shelf over here, a little bit newer ones. Some of them I haven't gotten to yet because, of course, I'm gifted books all the time.
Yeah.
But a lot of my teachings were from school, but also oral history. I'm sitting down with elders. And my first boss here is Terry Luther. He started the Fish and Wildlife programs back in the BIA days and then eventually the tribal days when we 638 BIA and started operating our own. But he hired me as a young youth intern, and then he told me, Austin, if you really want to learn about your resources and how to protect them, you need to talk to and listen to your tribal elders, your women. Listen to them because they will tell you stories. And so they have. I mean, still today, like I was just down at the Willamette Falls lamprey celebration, and our tribe was down there assisting with the celebration of lamprey coming back, like more or less a feast or a celebration, and sharing that with the public.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some elders there, and women and men, and they're just talking about their days of fishing the Willamette Falls as a young person and what they were told about the area. And that's like one of the existing falls in Oregon, obviously post Celilo Falls being inundated. But they were telling me a lot of stuff about who they were, what they did, who their families were. And I just kind of hold on to that. I try to write stuff down, but it's their history. So I just have to, oral history. I'll share it. Then I'll tell them, can you come in, sit down, kind of like we are doing, have a conversation. We'll document it. We'll transcribe it. And then, we just want permission to utilize it later down the road on something like maybe it's a study, protection, or preserving on a project. So that's what we do. So we document oral history.
Well, if you think any of them would ever be interested in sitting down and telling some of those stories on the podcast, I would really love to hear them.
Yeah. I mean, George Aguilar, he's pretty cognitive still. He's in his 90s. He's our oldest veteran.
Cool.
Served in World War II and Korean War.
Wow.
So, I mean, he wears his uniform every Veterans Day, Memorial's Day, and in I think he's 93 this year.
Wow.
Yeah, he has some really good stories. He has some good books to look into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If it ever comes up, I'll make the trip back down.
Okay.
Because I'm I'm really interested in preserving that. And one of the reasons that I started this podcast was to get these stories from some of these old timers recorded, because once they die, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right. And this is a way to hear them and to spread those stories around the world and to preserve them so that people can hear it told in that person's voice.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful thing, and we need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I also respect that those stories aren't for everybody to hear.
Yeah. I have to be careful as well. You know, I like I told you earlier before we started was, you know, there's stuff I'm open to sharing, and there's stuff that are not mine to share.
Yeah.
But if I'm given permission to share their stories,
Yeah.
I will. You know, I'll spread it and just let them know. And I do that in my job. I have to let the next generations, or those that are ignorant to the fact that there was resources here and they were protected from the beginning, that they are important for them to understand. And so the youth are like, they don't know. They don't understand. Why should I be doing this ceremony? Why should I be hoping to get my first kill or my first fish? Well, the reason why is you're protecting it because it's their life source. You know,
Yeah.
For us, our creation story is we were brought to this land, and there's elements that were pitiful. They felt pitiful for us, and so they gave themselves to us. You know, first was always water. Water came first, so we call it chush. And chush is water. It starts with water and ends with water. You know, it can bring life and it can take life, so we have to respect it. Then next came the fish. You know, the fish were next. They gave themselves. They gave their flesh to us, but they also gave us their voice. So the fish cannot speak, so they gave their voice to us, so we as human beings can speak. And so then after the fish came the deer and the elk and the sheep and the goats and all that. They gave their flesh to us, their furs to keep us warm, and then their bones to make tools, and their hooves to make regalia for song, for, you know, with our voice that came from the fish. And then came the roots and the berries and the I guess the materials for the make basketry, the vegetables and all that came. So if we take care of all those elements, you know, they all come in cycles and come in circles. If we take care of those and preserve them in the stewards, you know, basically we will continue on in our life and continue in our ways. As long as those are protected, everything within our homelands, our habitats, areas are all protected in that one big circle. That was really unique for me, and I've heard it said multiple ways from other tribes, and it's very much the same if you listen to Nez Perce, Umatilla, and Yakima tribes, and even some of the tribes over in Western Oregon, Western Washington, and they have a food cycle that they follow. As long as you protect those, and that's kind of where we are here with Warm Springs, especially with natural resources. If we protect these resources, we will continue to have deer, elk, fish, clean air, clean gut, whatnot. As conditions change, if we continue to protect them, they're going to continue to take care of us. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know, but I know there's a lot of cultural, traditional knowledge out there that can be shared to help us with that. I mean, this climate's acting crazy. Well, it's not new to us. We've adjusted in some form or fashion. We've moved to different areas, didn't exploit a certain area, went to areas and collected certain foods at a certain time and didn't over harvest, leave some for the next. And then we figured out, like, we need to continue to manage the forest better, because right now just saying this is it, we're not gonna do anything to this forest and letting it overgrow and get fueled and become like dog hair crazy where nothing will utilize it, that's not management.
Yeah,
we try to tell the feds that all the time, state environmentalists, that just saying this is wilderness and walking away, that's not management.
Yeah, it's neglect.
Oh yeah, very much.
Yeah, like the Wallowa Whitman has more natural mortality than it has natural growth every year. There's only one way that ends. Yeah, it's not good.
No.
So, you know, fire cycle used to be a big part of it.
Yep.
Well, we can't have that same fire cycle now after 120 years of fire suppression.
Yeah.
So what's left? Logging. And we can do that in a really responsible, sustainable way. Yeah, we've just got to have the courage to stand up to the folks who don't understand that and explain it in a way that they can understand, and then go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very important.
Yep.
Austin, these are beautiful stories, man. I really appreciate you telling me, and admire what you're doing to protect the natural resources here on the reservation, and trying to teach these lessons of sustainability to other people. Very, very important. We should all aspire to do our best to manage all of our natural resources in a way that they are sustainable, so that we can continue using them and keeping them healthy and keeping us healthy through the process.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Appreciate you a lot, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy lives to write a review for the show and share it with their friends. I'm extremely proud of how intelligent, engaged, and adventurous this audience is. Original music for the Six Ranch podcast is written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Harlander. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.